This is CJ Baker. This is an epic soundtrack to a mundane existence. And today we're going to discuss band names. So, when starting a band, one of the biggest challenges is coming up with a good band name. So, maybe trying to come up with something that sounds cool or something that well describes the vibe of your band. And the other challenge is coming up with a name that is unique and original. So there's a really good chance that whatever name you come up with, there's at least one other band out there that shares your name. And that's what we're going to discuss right now. We're going to discuss 10 well known bands that share a name with lesser known bands. So we'll get right into it and we'll begin with Public Enemy. So, of course, Public Enemy, iconic, legendary political rap group. But it's also good to note that according to Rate Your Music, there were four other Public Enemies, and three of which formed prior to the more famous rap group. So the other one that formed afterwards was a punk rock group from Spain who formed in 2019. So I'm not sure what happened there, how that kind of got through, but maybe Public Enemy are not as well known in Spain. I don't know. But out of the other Public Enemies, the one that's probably most well known and definitely the most notorious is an oi punk band from the UK. But unfortunately, through their music, they promoted neo Nazism and white supremacy. So we're not going to talk about them. The one I would like to mention was a power pop band who released a single in 1979. So, of course, sounds nothing like them. Public Enemy sounds nothing like Public Enemy. But you'll notice there's one striking similarity. But there is no evidence that Chuck D and Flavor Flav had any idea that these guys exist. So the identical font, it's probably just a weird coincidence. So the second band we're going to discuss is Eagles. So of course we know the country rock band with Don Henley, Glenn Frey, Joe Walsh, and the other guys. But what you might not have known was there was also a Jamaican reggae band named Eagles. La 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 la, la 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 la. La 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 la, la 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 la. That's why I say I'm going back to country living. And the reggae band, they were also sometimes referred to as Social Eagles or the Jamaican Eagles. So they only released a couple of singles, their first being in 1973, which was a year after the Eagles' self-titled debut. But it's entirely possible that they were already formed prior to that. So there's a really high probability that the two Eagles did not know that each other existed. So the Jamaican Eagles, they notably included Robbie Shakespeare of Sly and Robbie fame. So Sly and Robbie were very instrumental in the development and evolution of reggae music. They did a lot of production work and they were very much sought after musicians. So the next band we're going to discuss is Slipknot. So you probably know the new metal band who wears clown mask, but you probably never heard of the crossover thrash band of the same name. So the crossover thrash band that was also named Slipknot, they released one self-titled EP in 1989, while the more well-known Slipknot released their debut in 1996. So in this particular instance, the two bands really were not that far apart stylistically. So the fourth band is Oasis. So of course you probably know of the 90s Britpop band featuring the dueling Gallagher brothers. But according to Rate Your Music, there were 8 other musical acts that shared the name. So this includes a Japanese city pop group. It also included a UK band that featured the brother of Andrew Lloyd Webber. But based on the number of rankings on Rate Your Music, the most notable other Oasis were probably a psychedelic rock band who released only one album, a self-titled one, in 1973. So they were originally known as RJ Fox, and they recorded an album in 1971 that was never released until 1998. But as Oasis, their original self-titled 1973 release, the original vinyl press, there was only 500 copies of. So it is considered somewhat of a rarity. So the next band we're going to discuss is Slayer. So you probably know of the big four thrash metal band named Slayer. But according to Rate Your Music, there were at least 6 other Slayers. This includes an obscure new wave of British heavy metal band who released 2 EPs in 82 and in 1983. So the Slayer, in comparison, released their debut in 1983. So afterwards, Slayer ended up changing their name to Dragon Slayer. But even as Dragon Slayer, they still ended up being pretty obscure. So the next band we're going to discuss is Bush. So you probably heard of the 90s UK alt-rock band fronted by Gavin Rossdale. So if you happen to be Canadian like myself, you might remember that in Canada, they were referred to as Bush X. So the reason for that was pretty simple. There was a Canadian rock band with the same name. So they released one self-titled album in 1970. So they notably included guitarist Dominic Troiano, who notably was a member of James Gang, and he played in a number of notable Canadian bands. And this included being a member of the Guess Who for a couple of their albums between 1974 to 75. So the next band we're going to discuss is X. So X was an influential Los Angeles punk band who were prominently featured in the acclaimed 1981 documentary, The Decline of Western Civilization. So they formed in 1977 and they released their debut album in 1980. X was also an Australian punk band who formed in 1977 and released their debut album in 1980. Also, what stands out between the two bands is the similarities of the debut album covers. So there's no evidence that either band knew of each other at the time. So once again, this seems to be kind of a weird coincidence. So even though the LA X was the more well-known of the two, Australian X did release a few albums and did have a bit of a following in Australia. And it's also good to note that notably there was also a Japanese metal band named X Japan. But X Japan, when they released their first 3 albums, they released them under the name X. So once again, another band named X. And X Japan has had some success. So the next band we're going to discuss is Skid Row. So you probably know of the 1980s glam metal band featuring lead vocalist Sebastian Bach. What you may not know was that they were also a rock band from Ireland, which notably included Thin Izzy's Phil Lynott, who ended up leaving before their 1970 debut album. And it also included Gary Moore, who joined after Lynott left. So the band only had minimal commercial success, but their 1970 sophomore album, Skid, did manage to hit number 30 on the UK album chart. So concerning the use of the Skid Row name, Sebastian Bach recalls when Skid Row got signed to Atlantic, Gary Moore heard about it and said we could have the name for $35,000 US. We have to pay Gary Moore 35 grand to use the name? And so we, as a band, did buy the name from Gary Moore. We were all glad to do it because it's a great name for a band. I remember saying, wow, that's a lot of money, but we got to do it. That account is disputed by the original Skid Row band member, Bruce Shields, but there is clear evidence that the more famous Skid Row knew about the other, so they knew that the other existed. So the next band we're going to discuss is Iron Maiden. So yes, you probably know of the new wave of British heavy metal band, but you probably don't know about the 70s UK prog rock band, who were also referred to as the Iron Maiden. So they
must be falling down. Don't know where I'm going, but I know where I've been on this road before.
Released the 1970 single Fallen with the B-side Ned Kelly. Also in 1998, they released the archival album Maiden Voyage. So the final band we're going to discuss is Nirvana. So of course, the influential Seattle grunge group Nirvana, they don't need any introduction. But what might need introduction is the UK psychedelic band Nirvana, who released the debut concept album, The Story of Simon Simmerpath, in 1967. So they released the debut the same year that Kurt Cobain was born. And also, it's interesting to note, according to Rate Your Music, there were also 7 other musical acts with the name Nirvana.
Ja vidim je ovdje I njezin lik što isti je još A sad ja znam da to nije ona I zašto još uvijek da čeka gdje ja Ti dani dugi što prolaze sad Donose meni tugu I mir sve
But concerning Nirvana UK, they did end up suing the more well-known Nirvana in 1992, but they ended up settling out of court for an undisclosed amount. So in 1996, Nirvana UK released an album of unreleased material entitled Orange and Blue, and it happened to include a flower pop cover of the other Nirvana's Lithium. So the original plan was to record an entire album of Nirvana covers, which they were going to cheekily title Nirvana Sings Nirvana. But unfortunately, plans were scrapped after the death of Kurt Cobain. Also, a fun fact, one of the early names of the more well-known Nirvana was Skid Row. So we can take that back to what we discussed earlier as well. So that concludes our list. So can you think of any other well-known band names that share their name with a lesser band? Feel free to let me know in the comments. And if you want me to continue to make videos, please like and subscribe. You can also feel free to check out my website, Ongoing History of ProtestSongs.com. So thanks for watching, and please stay safe. I like it, I'm not gonna crack. I miss you, I'm not gonna crack. I love you, I'm not gonna crack. I killed you, I'm not gonna crack.